There will be explicit content this time, so just skip the link if you feel uncomfy reading this. It's not necessary for the plot. Osamu knew that it didn't make sense like that, and yet he couldn't stop getting involved with Suna. It was stupid. It was stupid, because Osamu knew exactly what made Suna tick. He knew that Suna didn't take anything between them seriously. He knew that this all was just a joke to Suna. He knew everything between them was meaningless, and most of all, Osamu knew that Suna would never feel the same way about him as he did about Suna. And it bothered him. It bothered him because Suna had never been interested in him, while Osamu was always, absolutely always looking out for Suna. Osamu didn't know how long he had secretly had a crush on Suna. He had always suppressed his feelings, because Suna was Suna and Osamu was Osamu. They were best friends. And Suna was definitely not a person Osamu should ever get involved with in this sort of relationship. And yet he couldn't get away from him. They acted as if nothing had happened between them. As if Suna hadn't cheated on Komori twice already, and as if Osamu hadn't enjoyed their little secret immensely, and vice versa of course. So it happened again. And again and again and again. This was no longer just a mistake. This was no longer a one-time thing, and certainly not just helping out a friend. This was cheating. Shameless, deceitful cheating, and Osamu hated himself because Komori really was a good guy. He definitely deserved someone better than Suna. And damn it, Suna was his best friend. He shouldn't get involved with this idiot. And yet, sitting bare-chested on the edge of Osamu's bed, he had come to Osaka over the weekend to visit his family and had left Komori back in Nagano. Terms couldn't have been better for Suna. Would you ever date me? Osamu spoke bluntly. His gaze lingered on Suna's lower back, on his hip, which showed small bruises where Osamu had grabbed a little too hard minutes before. He frowned, feeling bad for causing Suna some pain, even though Suna insisted that Osamu shouldn't loosen his grip, but somehow he also liked seeing his marks on Suna's body, and those were by far not the only ones. Suna pulled on his shirt and had his head tilted back slightly, glancing at Osamu out of the corner of his eye. Why? He didn't make a face, slowly slipping his shirt on as if there was nothing between them. Osamu pouted a bit at the lost view and turned his look to his hands. His fingers were fidgeting. He sat in his bed, leaning back against the headboard, the blanket covering his lower body. Osamu shrugged his shoulders. Dunno. Would ya? He looked up and met Suna's peering gaze. He stood up wordlessly, put on his pants, and said nothing. Then he sighed, ran his hand through his hair, and turned around, sitting back on the edge of the bed and facing Osamu. No. Osamu frowned. Why? For some reason his heart slipped into the pit of his stomach. Suna's answer was somewhat unsettling, yet his best friend just gave him a mischievous look. His hand wandered to Osamu's thigh and lingered there. Well, would you? Huh? Would you date me? Osamu looked at him startled for a moment, then frowned, swallowed thickly, and returned his gaze to his own hands. I know you too well for that. Huh? You're a heartbreaker, Rin. Meaning? You date for your own fun, not serious about anyone you go out with. Oh, you've got me all figured out. Suna grinned impishly, leaning forward to Osamu and pressing his index finger against his chest. Osamu's skeptical gaze met Suna's goofy one. Yet you're still dating Komori. And it's been what? A year already? 10 months. Suna pointed out. His relationships never last longer than 6 months as a max, and half a year was already uncommon. Osamu frowned. You're serious with him? Suna shrugged his shoulders. He's a good guy, you know, he's sweet. And this? Huh? What's this about? Are you serious? With me? Suna leaned towards Osamu's mouth, nibbling on his bottom lip before lapsing into a sloppy kiss. Osamu returned it, pressing him close with his hand in his hair before Suna pulled away, a string of saliva linking their glistening lips. Suna smirked. He ran his thumb over Osamu's slightly ajar mouth, letting his hand run over his cheek as he stood up and disengaged from him completely. He walked to the door, leaving Osamu confused. Rin. Osamu's voice was questioning, uncertain. Suna's hand lingered on the doorframe to the bedroom, his head tilted slightly to the side to look at his best friend out of the corner of his eye. He stopped, letting a sly grin flit across his lips. Well, he began, his head now tilted a little further towards Osamu. I'm not dating you, am I? What time does the twins' party start tomorrow? Suna looked up from his phone sleepily as he leaned against the kitchen counter. He met Komori's questioning gaze, who had meanwhile made himself comfortable on the couch in Suna's living room. I don't know. Around 8, I think. Okay. We're going to Osaka right after practice? Yup. Suna smiled faintly as he walked towards Komori. The libero extended his arms, awaiting Suna on his lap, where the middle blocker immediately settled in, straddling him. Komori brushed Suna's bangs from his face as he loosely wrapped his arms around Komori's neck. They stared into each other's eyes for a moment before Komori pulled Suna down in a kiss. The twins' birthday came up, and they had invited all their friends to a 𝒕𝒍𝒂𝒄𝒆𝒔 in Osaka. Among them, of course, Suna and Komori. Eager. Suna smiled into the kiss. Still waiting for my dessert. Oh. I guess I can't keep you waiting for too long then. Komori grinned as he helped Suna slowly remove his shirt. Suna slipped it over his head and leaned down into another kiss. Komori grabbed Suna's hip, the exact spot where Osamu had left his marks, causing Suna to briefly hiss in pain. Komori immediately backed away and threw his hands in the air, looking apologetically at Suna with his eyes wide open. Shit, sorry. Suna whined, pouting a bit at the abrupt loss of Komori's touch on his body and looking at him somewhat reproachfully. Huh? Komori's gaze drifted to the brozes, one eyebrow slowly traveling up to meet his hair. He let his fingertips brush over them, and Suna looked at him questioningly. His gaze followed Komori's out of the corner of his eye and landed on Osamu's marks. Suna's heart leapt. He looked him in the eyes again, saw that the man beneath him was completely distracted by them. Suna swallowed. Twa. Komori's gaze snapped back up to Suna, his movements stilled. Huh? Everything okay? Komori frowned. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, and laughed somewhat sheepishly. I didn't remember being so rough last time. You didn't let on. I enjoyed in silence. Whereas with Osamu, he hadn't been quiet one bit. Komori smirked, leaned towards Suna's neck and grabbed his hips again, pressing him down closer to him. He whispered against his skin. Well, let's mark your whole body then, shall we? And Suna bit his lips. Don't hold back. Osamu gritted his teeth and downed what was probably the 100th tequila shot tonight, just wanting to be drunk, which worked out pretty well. Hey Samu, are you okay? Could never have been better. Atsumu snacked on some chips while standing behind the counter of a 𝒕𝒍𝒂𝒄𝒆𝒔 along with Osamu. They had rearranged the restaurant a bit to make room for dancing and to accommodate the many people they had invited. In addition to practically the entire MSBY team, all of Inarizuki's former teammates had also come. A 𝒕𝒍𝒂𝒄𝒆𝒔 was packed, and yet Osamu's eyes lingered on one very particular person. Suna was dancing arm in arm with Komori. The libero had his back turned to Osamu, while Suna rested his chin on the latter's shoulder and gazed at the gray-haired twin. Osamu's chest tightened while Suna smirked at him. Fuck, it was a terrible idea to drink against Kyo. Suna turned his face into the crook between Komori's neck and shoulder and chuckled, his gaze still locked with Osamu's eyes. Suna started kissing him and Osamu gulped, propping his arms on the kitchen counter to keep his balance because he didn't know if it was the alcohol or Suna that was making him so drunk. Tipsy? Osamu shuddered at the thought of how Suna's lips would feel against his neck. Just a little. Suna's hand gripped Komori's hair on the back of his neck, while the other traveled down his back, his gaze still fixed on Osamu. Chills went down Osamu's spine, as he imagined he felt Suna's touch on his body. And Sakusa? Komori chuckled lightly, pulling Suna's chin towards him, which broke the eye contact between him and Osamu for a few seconds, and Osamu clenched his jaw. Komori pulled Suna into a kiss and the latter opened his eyes, meeting Osamu's icy gaze. As they broke away from their kiss, Suna's gaze drifted back to Komori and felt him run his thumb over his lower lip, closing his eyes for a moment at the thought of Osamu doing that. I think Kyo can take some more. Komori grinned and so did Suna as he opened his eyes again and met Komori's beam. Why don't you get him drunk? Komori chuckled. What if I end up getting drunk? I wouldn't mind. Do you want me to get drunk? Suna's eyes blazed for a brief moment. Maybe I do. Komori laughed softly and gave Suna a peck on the cheek. He broke away from him and squeezed his hand lightly as he made his way to his cousin. In the meantime, Suna walked to the twins, where an equally drunk Atsumu was already waiting for him. Rin. You should have another shot with us. Should I? You should. Suna giggled and nodded. Atsumu poured them another shot and passed them around. Here's to your birthday. Cheers. Suna and Osamu stared deeply into each other's eyes as they both downed their shot. The corners of Suna's mouth twitched into a grin. He gazed at Osamu for a moment longer before turning back to Atsumu. Hey Tsumu, I think you should go check on your boyfriend. Motoya is planning to get him drunk. Drunk Omi means clingy Omi. I'll help him. Atsumu rushed to Sakusa and Komori, leaving a chuckling Suna and an only half amused Osamu behind. Suna sat at the counter, resting his arms on top of it and tilting his head back to the side where he could look after Atsumu. He turned his head forward again and met Osamu's serious gaze, their positions somehow similar to when this had all started between them. Suna rested his chin in his palms. Hey. Osamu twitched his eyebrows. Having fun? Osamu released his arms from the counter and crossed them in front of his chest. His gaze still locked with Suna's. Not as much as I'd like to have. Suna chuckled. He was definitely already quite tipsy himself. He turned his head and observed the people around him, grinning as he noticed that everyone without exception was busy enough to pay any attention to them. Come on. Suna stood up, gave a nod towards the kitchen, and walked around the counter. What are you up to? Osamu's gaze followed him steadily, looking at him skeptically. Suna put a hand on his shoulder and leaned into his ear, whispering, "Birthday surprise." Suna smiled as he broke away from Osamu and walked into the kitchen. Osamu took a deep breath, gathered the empty glasses and put them on a tray. He propped himself up against the counter and shook his head slightly, looking towards the kitchen where Suna must already be waiting for him. Osamu looked up from the counter and let his gaze drift once more over the crowd. Everyone really did look busy. He followed Suna a few minutes later, slowly pushing open the door to the kitchen and stepping inside with a raised eyebrow. He spotted Rin, who was lazily scrolling through his phone, and looked up at him with a smile as he spotted Osamu. His face lit up from below by his screen, since the kitchen was otherwise dark and only lit up by the restaurant. Suna put his phone aside and walked towards Osamu. Rin. Suna met him in a kiss and pushed Osamu back against the wall, sighing as his hands immediately found his hips. The kiss escalated quickly, becoming more heated, more urgent. Suna pushed them both around the corner, where most of the ingredients for Osamu's restaurant were stowed on shelves and they couldn't be seen immediately in case someone got the stupid idea to enter the kitchen. The twins had already told everyone that was a taboo. Suna's hand slipped between the hem of Osamu's sweater and his skin, but Osamu grabbed them before they would somehow go any further. He put some space between them and took a deep breath. Komori is outside. I know, he said breathlessly, immediately reconnecting his lips with Osamu's. Osamu grinned into their kiss. And you still wanna? Now? Here? Everyone is busy drinking and dancing. They could be checking on the birthday boys. Oh, I'm sure Tsumu will entertain them. Osamu smirked as Suna tugged on his lower lip. So how about entertaining me now, Samu? A little selfish, aren't you? I thought I was getting a birthday surprise. Suna draped his arms over Osamu's shoulders and grinned against his lips. Well then, let me surprise you, Osamu. Click on the Instagram link in the info box if you want to read the nasty stuff. As mentioned, it's not necessary for the plot. Osamu captured Suna's lips in a slow kiss once they calmed down. He cupped Suna's face, caressing his cheeks with his thumb and pulling away softly. They stared into each other's eyes and Osamu's heart beat a tad faster seeing Suna like this, cheeks flushed and hair a mess. We should go back before someone notices we're gone. Suna hummed, dazed by Osamu. Yeah, too late for that.